The Richat structure, I was on your show a little over a year ago and shared some details about it. To people who aren't aware, there's a location in the Western Sahara Desert of Mauritania called the Richat structure. It's also commonly referred to as the Eye of the Sahara. It is a site that most people have never seen or heard of before, which is truly peculiar because it's so spectacular. It's a site that astronauts typically use to reference from space. It is a geological feature that is said to be volcanic in nature. And what's so spectacular about this is that it just so happens to match more than a dozen striking similarities to what Plato had described as the lost ancient capital city of Atlantis.
I almost feel like we're not going to do your video justice by just talking about it because the video is so good and you go into so many details. By the end of it, my jaw was dropped. I was like, holy shit. Like, from what you had the last time you were on the podcast to what you put out now, it's even more compelling. Like, way more compelling.
I appreciate you saying that. And I guess to anyone that wants to check it out, I have a YouTube channel called Bright Insight. It's right at the top of the page. And it says, Lost Ancient Roman Map has Atlantis and Sahara, Africa. And that's kind of where it goes from there, is that there is a... Actually, let me just mention real quick. Like, you're a very inquisitive individual. You have many interesting people that come and chat with you. And when I had asked you last time, you said that until you had saw my video, you'd never seen or heard of the Richat structure.
Never heard of it, yeah.
Anytime I meet somebody new or if I'm at some party and be like, oh, what do you do? And we start chatting about YouTube, the first thing I do now is I show them a picture of the Richat. And I've never, not once, ever come across one single person that has seen or heard of it before, other than people who are familiar with what I've shared.
But there's so many things, like the where the water flows to the south, where there's clear evidence of water erosion that took place after the volcano. There's so much that points to that possibly being Atlantis.
It's spectacular. So just to run down real quick, Plato had described Atlantis as being the capital. Let me just mention that because it was an empire said to be made up of 10 kingdoms. And what I'm focusing on is the lost capital city, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 3 of water, 2 of land, which matches the Richat structure. It also was said to have an opening to the sea at the south. And if you look at it from satellite imagery, you can clearly see that water had ran through it.
Let's take a look at that. Tell Jimmy what image to pull up so we can...
And furthermore, it was said to have mountains to the north, and you just so happen to have mountains called the Atlas mountain chain, which Atlas was said to be the very first king of Atlantis. And what's interesting is that the very first known king of Mauritania, which is where the Richat structure is located, is also... Their very first known king was also named Atlas. And though I'm not saying that that's the same individual, but what we do today is we pass down names, right? Like people like, oh, my dad's name's John, and so is my son. And so it's another striking similarity, but it goes further than that. Like there's geological similarities, such as the fact that Atlantis was said to be made up of red, black, and white color stone, which is another similarity you see at the Richat structure. It was said to have an abundance of gold and that the outer walls were lined with it. And it turns out that Mauritania is loaded with gold. And not only that, the richest person ever known to exist in all of mankind is Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire, which consisted partly of modern-day Mauritania. And he was so rich from gold that he would be richer than Elon Musk and like Bezos combined almost. Like many unfathomable amount of billions of dollars. So that's another similarity.
What year was this?
Oh, this is 1300s or 1400s.
There he is.
Yeah, there we are. 1312, 1337.
What a great name, too. Mansa Musa.
But the similarities don't end there. There was said to be an abundance of elephants, which is one reason why to suggest that Atlantis would have been in Africa is because, well, besides the fact that elephants are known to be throughout Africa, they used to be in Mauritania. They're unfortunately pretty much extinct there today. But another little detail that most people aren't aware of because they think of Atlantis like, oh, it must be at the bottom of the ocean. Well, that's not exactly how Plato worded it. He did describe that the aftermath of Atlantis followed a catastrophic event involving water, is that what was left of Atlantis was reeds of grass and a shoal of mud that prevented ships from navigating to and from. And what people don't realize is that Sahara Africa, up until about 4,500 to 5,000 years ago, was totally green. It was tropical. It had the largest network, or one of the largest networks of rivers ever known to exist. It had the largest freshwater lake ever known to exist, which is Mega Lake Chad, which, just to put this into perspective, it is, if you take all the North American Great Lakes combined, that's 94,000 square miles of surface area, whereas Mega Lake Chad was 139,000.
Whoa.
Massive. Additionally, Atlantis, the capital, was said to have a river that went just north of it or next to it. And the Tamanrasset River went right through the Rishat structure or just north of it, went all the way to the Atlas Mountains that I described, which is in modern-day Morocco. And the evidence is that it existed at that same period of time when Atlantis was said to be around 11,600 years ago prior to its destruction, up until about 5,000 years ago. So going back to my point, like a lot of people see the Sahara Desert and they don't realize that this place was unbelievably different than it is today. And one of the things that's so important is that I know some people listening will, they hear Atlantis, they think, oh, it didn't exist.
Right.
Whether it existed or not, the evidence that we're going to chat about today to show you that there is conclusive evidence, I would say, that catastrophic water erosion, that the ocean had blasted through the Sahara tens of millions of years more recently than previously known. According to the science, 56 to 66 million years ago was the time of the Trans-Saharan Seaway, which was the last time the ocean blasted through it. However, there are a few lines of evidence that say otherwise. Besides the fact that anyone that looks at the Sahara Desert through the Google Earth app, you can see fluvial striations, which is signature traits of water erosion. This is confirmed by other experts that look into these things. I like to mention Randall Carlson. Mm-hmm. He's someone that's analyzed the area and has said, yes, this is catastrophic water erosion. So one of the signature lines of evidence that suggests that the ocean blasted through it far more recently was the largest volcano in Sahara Africa is in Chad. It's Mount Kusi, and there's a lava flow that goes through it that is dated at 12,000 or so years ago. The volcano itself is supposed to be somewhere between 1.2 and 2.3 million years ago. But if you look at Mount Kusi to the south, you can see, and I don't know, Jamie, if you're able to bring up one of the photos of that mountain chain, but you can see that the water erosion cuts off that lava flow directly to the south. Yeah, keep going over. A little bit right there. Okay, so go over a couple. That is the mountain, and you can see those striations, which are signature traits of water erosion. All those white blemishes are salt, and I should point out real quick that it is a confirmed fact that much of the Sahara has surface level salt. And you see those white blemishes on that mountain? That is not cloud. That is not snow. Those are salt deposits.
And surface level salt that would have been from the ocean?
That is what I suggest.